All right, it's time to do my least favorite video of the week, the updated top 25. I really don't like doing these. It's just, I guess it's fun for the argument point of view that comes out of it, because, of course, nobody ever agrees with anybody's top 25, top to bottom, and I don't expect you to agree with this one either. And I agree with a lot of your comments every week about how the top 25s are pointless this early in the season and blah, blah, blah. I'll tell you the one positive I do take away from doing these top 25 rankings every Monday. It gives me an opportunity and kind of forces me really to go through every top 25 team, or really top 30 team. I can pull up the AP top 25 and I see where the AP has those 25 teams, and then it shows me who they played last week, who they play this coming week. And with the others receiving votes, it gives you like an idea of, the next 10 or 15 teams that a lot of people think may be close to getting into the top 25. It sort of forces you to take at least a brief look at a whole lot of teams in a short period of time. And I do kind of like that. It gives me an opportunity to look into a handful of teams that maybe otherwise I wouldn't get a chance to look into. But here we go. This is my updated top 25 right there. There it is. Okay. More changes in the bottom half of the top 25 this week than the top half of the top 25. Let me start with teams 1 through 6, though, which did not change at all, right? Yeah, 1 through 6 did not change at all. Here's the thing. I had Georgia 2 last week. I know the AP, I guess, moved Georgia from 1 to 2 this week after the 1 point win on the road against Kentucky, which was a really bad win. Texas blew out another elementary school. Ohio State didn't play. Ole Miss blew out Wake Forest. Alabama blew out Wisconsin. Tennessee blew out an elementary school. Here's the thing with these top 6 teams. I don't think anybody in this top 6 is a lot to beat all other 5 teams. Like, in other words, it's hard for me. I don't know who the best team is out of these top 6. I don't have a clue. I can argue for any of these 6 teams. I can make a case for any of these 6 teams here, I think. I can make a case that Tennessee could beat Georgia. I can make a case that Alabama would beat Ohio State. I can make a case that Ohio State could beat Texas. I can make a case that Texas could beat Ole Miss. We're still real early in the season. The one thing that I am pretty sure of right now is that these are the best 6 teams in the country right now. Now, the playoffs don't start right now. They don't start tomorrow. They don't start next week. And a lot of these teams are going to play each other, particularly this bunch of SEC teams here. I've got, 5 of my top 6 are SEC. A lot of these teams are going to play each other. So the guessing game portion of a lot of this is going to get solved on the field, right? Georgia plays Alabama in 2 weeks. Georgia plays Texas in about a month. Georgia plays Tennessee in November. So Georgia plays, and Georgia plays 4 of these top 6 teams coming up. Tennessee plays Georgia and Bama. So a lot of this stuff will kind of sort itself out. But let me just tell you where I'm at briefly here with each of these 6 teams. You look at Texas, they're 3-0. They've got 2 wins against elementary schools and 1 blowout win against a ranked team, Michigan, on the road in Michigan, an impressive win. Georgia's 3-0. They're the only team in the top 6 with 2 Power 5 wins. Now, again, I get it. The Kentucky game was really bad. Georgia didn't look good at all. But if just looking at the facts and trying to take any and all opinion out of it quick for this portion of the video and just talking about what the teams have actually done, who they've played, who they've beat, all that kind of thing. Texas blew out Michigan on the road, very impressive, and then 2 blowout wins over high school teams. Georgia, a blowout win over a ranked team at a neutral site. Again, that was the Clemson game. A blowout win over an elementary school and a close win over a Power 5 team, but that still gives Georgia 2 Power 5 wins. Nobody else in the top 6 has that yet. Again, it's really early in the season. Ohio State has played the least number of games of any of these top 6 teams. They've only played 2. I thought about moving Ohio State to 6 and moving Ole Miss, Bama, and Tennessee each up a spot. Not because I think any of those teams would beat Ohio State. I don't know if they would or not. Like I said, I think any of these 6 teams could beat any of the others. But just because they've only played 2 games, they're both against elementary schools. They're the only team in the top 6 that doesn't have a win against the Power 5. Again, none of that is Ohio State's fault. And I'm not saying that to say that that means Ohio State isn't as good as any of the other teams in the top 6. But when I do my top 25, there's no way to take opinion out of it altogether. But I try to use less opinion than I do actual fact. And the fact is, Ohio State has 2 wins and everybody else in the top 6 has 3. Everybody in the top 6 has a Power 5 win, at least one Power 5 win, except Ohio State. So I thought about dropping them down. I decided to just leave the top 6 alone. Again, a lot of these teams are about to take significant steps up in competition, and I think a lot of this stuff will work itself out. You look at Ole Miss. First 2 weeks of the year, they blew out 2 elementary schools. Last week was their first Power 5 opponent. Now it was Wake Forest. But they blew them out, right? Unlike Georgia, who went on the road and played a bad Power 5 team, Kentucky, and was lucky to escape with a win. Ole Miss blew them out. You can make a case that Ole Miss should be 2, probably, or even 1 if you want. Like I said, you can make a case for any of these teams to be number 1. And Ole Miss may beat Georgia. Georgia plays them later in the year at Ole Miss. Ole Miss may beat them. Ole Miss looks like a really good team. I still think Georgia's win over Clemson is a more impressive win, again, early in the season than any win Ole Miss has so far. And that's not Ole Miss's fault. They have only played who's on their schedule. I get it. So you can make arguments either way. That's why I decided to leave it alone. Alabama, they played their first Power 5 opponent this past weekend on the road at Madison, Wisconsin, and absolutely destroyed them. So Alabama looked pretty shaky a couple of weeks ago at home against South Florida. They appear to have got those problems fixed. They go on the road, play their first Power 5 game of the year, and they absolutely blew them out. So you can use that as a reason to move Alabama up in your ranking if you want to. Now, Wisconsin was an unranked team, so I still think that Georgia's win over Clemson and Texas' win over Michigan are better wins than Alabama's win over Wisconsin. Again, that doesn't mean that either Texas or Georgia, either one, are better than Alabama. It just means right now they have a better win. Again, we're only 3 weeks into the season. In Ohio State's case, they've only played 2 games. Tennessee's got the win over NC State, right? Which turns out might not be a great team, but still it was a Power 5 win. The other 2 wins for Tennessee are against elementary schools. Tennessee will have a chance this weekend to get a big win on the road at Oklahoma, right? I've got Oklahoma ranked 17. We've got Clemson ranked 15. Those wins would be pretty similar. Now, Tennessee's would be on the road, whereas Georgia's would be at home. So Tennessee's got a chance to really, I think, cement themselves as one of the top teams in the country this week if they can go on the road and get a win in Norman. So that's just kind of my thought process about the top 6 teams. Again, it didn't change any from last week. That doesn't mean that I wasn't impressed with some of these teams. I thought Texas looked really good against an elementary school. I thought Ole Miss looked good against Wake Forest. I thought Bama looked great on the road at Wisconsin. I thought Tennessee looked good against an elementary school. So it's not that they didn't look good or play. Really, the only one of these teams that didn't look good was Georgia. But again, Georgia's the only one of them with 2 Power 5 wins. So there's some positive and some negative to any of these 6 teams, I think. And you can justify or find reasoning to rank any of these 6 teams, I think, anywhere in the top 6. But I do think these should be the top 6 teams in whatever order you want them to be in. So if you want to, go down in the comments and tell me I should have Georgia at 4 instead of 2, I'm not even going to, I don't disagree with you. I think as long as these 6 teams are somewhere in your top 6, you've got a pretty good top 6. My issue with Miami, well, I don't have an issue with Miami. I think Miami's really, really good. They absolutely destroyed Florida back in week 1. And they've beat a couple of nobodies since then. Again, that's not Miami's fault. They can only play the schedule that's in front of them, right? They're going to get an opportunity down the road to play some better competition, depending on how good overall you think the ACC is. But I've watched Miami play. I know how much talent they have there. And if Cam Ward keeps playing at as high of a level as he has early in this season, Miami is going to be in the playoffs at the end of the year. It doesn't matter what you, me, or anyone else think about the ACC top to bottom. And look, there's going to be some teams that get into the playoffs that aren't on the level of whoever you think the best 2 or 3 teams are, right? Okay, great. maybe your team will get to play one of those teams then, and you'll be glad, right? Because it would be an easy win if that's what you think. I'm not saying that would be Miami, but I think Miami right now, there may be some people out there who want to include Miami the way I talk about my top 6. Like maybe I should be talking about my top 7 and putting Miami sort of in that group. To me, Miami is still a little bit below that. And I'll admit, this is where some opinion is coming in. I try to keep opinion out of the rankings, but like I said, it's impossible because you are judging teams with similar or the same record that aren't going to play each other. So there's got to be some opinion involved, right? I'm high on Miami. I think that's obvious. They're the clear favorite in my mind right now to win the ACC and make the playoffs. So I'm not shitting on Miami here. But it is hard to separate in my mind what I'm seeing from Miami right now with what I've seen from the last 20 years from them, which is finding ways to get in their own way, trip over their own feet, lose games they shouldn't, blah, 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 all those kinds of things, right? It doesn't appear that this Miami team is headed towards doing that. And I've got them at 7. And I think that's higher even than the AP. The AP, where does the AP have? Do I have the AP pulled up here? Where does the AP have Miami? The AP's got them at 8. So I've got them a spot higher, even than the AP. And I'm not trying to crap on them by saying I don't quite think they're in that top tier yet. A little bit more earning it, I think, is what a lot of people, myself included, need to see from Miami, and they'll have some opportunities to do that down the road. Like I said, they have a road game this week at South Florida. South Florida played Bama pretty tough a couple of weeks ago. We'll see what Miami does with them this coming Saturday. As far as the top 6, Georgia and Bama are both on a bye this week. Of course, they then play in 2 weeks in Tuscaloosa. Texas is hosting UL Monroe, which is a good time for this game. Quinn Ewers is out with an abdominal injury, an oblique strain. For the Georgia fans watching, this is what kept JT Daniels out for a long time back in, I guess that was 2021. Texas plays UL Monroe, and then the week after that, they play Mississippi State. No shade on Mississippi State, but these are 2 easy wins for Texas. I would be shocked if Quinn Ewers plays in either of the next 2 games, UL Monroe or Mississippi State. Now, after that comes the Texas game. And obviously, Texas, the plan will be, I'm sure, to work Ewers up to the point where he's ready to go for that Oklahoma game. But I'd be absolutely shocked if we see him before then. Georgia and Bama on buys, like I mentioned. Ohio State hosts Marshall. Ohio State, look, it is what it is. Ohio State this year has the Michigan non-con schedule from the last 2 years. They just play absolutely nobody in the non-con. So it's going to be another few weeks before we see Ohio State play anybody with a pulse or a heartbeat at all. Ole Miss hosts Georgia Southern, another elementary school. Tennessee is on the road at Oklahoma. Probably the biggest game of the week is Oklahoma's first SEC game. Josh Heupel headed back to Norman, and he, of course, played there. He won a Heisman there, didn't he? Anyway, huge game. 2 top 15 teams, both undefeated. Huge game there. And Missouri hosts Vanderbilt, their first SEC game of the year. Miami at South Florida, like I mentioned. And that gets us caught back up to my rankings here. I've got Utah at number 8. I dropped Utah a spot from 7 to 8. I flip-flopped Miami and Utah is what I did for 2 reasons. One is an opinion, one is a fact. First, the opinion. Having watched these 2 teams play a couple of times, I just think Miami's better. I'm just going to be honest. Now, does that mean if they played, Miami would win? No, it's just my opinion from what I've seen from these 2 teams. Miami looks a little better than Utah. I moved them up. The other thing is Cam Rising's hurt and injured again. They played who'd they play this week? Utah played another Utah school, the Utah State, Northern Utah. Utah played Utah State. They won 38-21, so a 17-point win. But look, I've seen Utah play without Cam Rising. Saw it all last year. They were a 4-loss team. They got to get Cam Rising back. I'm not going to punish Utah for winning without Cam Rising, but I am going to reward Miami for looking better than Utah over the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, so I flip-flop those 2 there. I've got Oregon at 9. That's up from 11. Now, look, here's the deal. I keep telling y'all, I move these teams around a lot in the first month of the season because you're trying to figure out which teams you were right about and which teams you were wrong about. Well, I had Oregon in the top 5. I had them all the way up at number 3 at one point, Oregon. And clearly they did not look like the third best team in the country the first couple of weeks of the season when they struggled against the entire state of Idaho. It was bad. So I moved them all the way down from 3 to 11. I punished them for looking terrible against those two teams. Well, they finally played a Power 5 opponent this week, the Civil War game, the in-state rivalry against Oregon State, and they absolutely destroyed them 49-14, and they looked like the Oregon that myself and a lot of people thought we would see this year. So I had them at 11. Not a huge bump up here. I moved them up 2 spots. I moved them up to 9. Again, Power 5 win over Oregon State, and I think they are better than Kansas State and Missouri. I just think if they played, Oregon would beat either one of them. Again, I could be wrong. That's just the opinion part of it. The fact part of it is they blew out Oregon State. Kansas State had an impressive win this week. I moved them up 2 spots. I moved them from 12 all the way up to number 10, Kansas State. They beat Arizona. This was the Friday night game. And look, Arizona's a pretty good team, but they got a really good quarterback and wide receiver. And I thought Kansas State did a pretty good job for the most part of shutting those two down. Only 1 touchdown allowed by Kansas State to Arizona this past Friday. Arizona got the ball to start the game. They went right down the field and scored. They never scored again. Only scored 7 points. Kansas State takes care of business at home. They beat number 20 at the time, Arizona, 31-7. So the game wasn't even close. Now it's a weird situation where that's a non-conference game, even though both of those teams are in the Big 12, because this game was scheduled before the expansion, and these two teams agreed to keep the game on the schedule as long as the Big 12 would count it as a non-conference game. The Big 12 agreed, so they kept it on the schedule. So that game does not affect the Big 12 standings. Arizona is not 0-1 in the Big 12, and Kansas State is not 1-0 in the Big 12. They're both 0-0 in the Big 12. It didn't count at all towards the Big 12 standings, but it did give us a pretty idea of kind of some of the pecking order within the Big 12, and it's starting to shake out a little bit. I think you've got Utah, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State, to me, clearly the top 3 teams in the Big 12 right now, just the way things look early in the season. I think Central Florida could potentially become a problem for people later in the year, and we'll see what happens, after that with some of the other teams in the Big 12. But that's where I kind of stack up the Big 12 right now. So I've got Kansas State at 10, rewarding them for a dominating ranked win against Arizona, and that puts Missouri at 11. I had Missouri last week at number 10. Now, the AP's got them higher this week. They had them higher last week. The AP actually dropped Mizzou too. They had Missouri at 6 last week. I made a big deal about that. I did not think Missouri should have been ranked 6. I don't think they're a top 6 team. I think they're a borderline top 15 type of team. And I think that as a result of their schedule, they've got a chance of sneaking into the playoffs with a late seed. They just avoid a lot of if you look at the top 5 or 6 and you see all these SEC teams, Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, Bama, Tennessee, they play one of those teams. They play Bama, and that's it. They don't play Texas. They don't play Georgia. They don't play Ole Miss, and they don't play Tennessee. Now, that's not Missouri's fault, and I'm not punishing them for that. In fact, I'm kind of rewarding them because they've got a chance of getting to the end of the year at 10-2. And if they're 10-2 at the end of the year in an SEC team, they're going to have a good chance of getting into the playoffs. So that's what I mean when I say I think they're a borderline top 15 team in the country, but I think they have a better chance than that, a better than average chance of actually getting into the playoffs, which would technically make them a top 12 team as a result of their schedule. That's what I mean. But they did play Boston College this weekend at home. Boston College was ranked somewhere 20-25. And they beat them 27-21. Now, the game was never really in doubt. You look at the scoreboard and you see it's a 6-point game. Did Missouri blow them out? No. But Missouri pretty much controlled this game from start to finish. And me dropping them in my rankings from last week, I had them at 10. This week, I have them at 11. It's not a punishment for Missouri as much as it is sort of recalculating Oregon. And I thought Kansas State's win against Arizona was more impressive than Missouri's win against Boston College. Kansas State beat Arizona 31-7 at home. Missouri beat Boston College at home, 37-21. So that's my explanation for 9, 10, and 11. At 12, I've got Penn State. That's down 3 spots. And again, that is not their fault. They were on a bye week. They didn't play, okay? They've got an impressive win week 1 against West Virginia, so a Power 5 win. They did not look great week 2. They escaped with a win against Ball State in a game where they trailed for a large portion of that game. So I'm still a little up in the air on Penn State in terms of how good of a team they actually are. Potential, I think they've got the potential to compete in the Big Ten. Whether or not they reach that potential or can play at a high enough level consistently enough throughout the course of the season to actually make that happen, I'm still not so sure. I would kind of put Penn State in the Missouri category. I think Penn State is probably top 15-ish. And I think because they're in the Big Ten and because of the way the schedule sets up for them, there's a possibility they end up at 10-2 and get one of those, last 4 or 3 or 4 playoff spots. I do think that's a possibility. Louisville, I've got at 13, and they're the team on my top 25 that I am least certain about. Louisville might be a top 10 team. They might be borderline top 25. I just don't know. And what I mean by that is they, of course, had a good record last year and played for the ACC championship game. Well, they also lost in the regular season finale to Kentucky, who was not great last year. They didn't play well. They beat a depleted, or they lost to a anemic Florida State team in the ACC championship game. And then here they are again, off to another good start this year. And it's hard. It's just hard for me to I just don't. I have no idea how good they are. I don't. I feel like me having them at 13 is pretty fair. They're ranked 19th in the AP, and they didn't play this past week, so they're 2-0. I had them at 13 last week, and so I just left them the same at 13. Now, they have what I think will be their toughest game so far this season coming up this weekend when they host Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is 2-1 with a loss to Syracuse and a win over Florida State and Georgia State. So we'll see. Syracuse, it's to be a Power 5 opponent, at least for Syracuse, an ACC game. We'll see how they look this week, but I've got Louisville at 13. Southern Cal, I've got at 14. This is another team that I'm not exactly sure how good they are. I'm not high on LSU. I don't think LSU is a very good team. I've got them ranked 19th. That's a gift. I think they were lucky to escape with a win against a not very good South Carolina team this weekend. They've already got a loss to Southern Cal, but I don't know how good that win is for Southern Cal. Defensively, they've looked good. And that's weird to say for a Lincoln Riley team. Now, it's early in the season. They were off this week. They got a big game this week on the road at Michigan. Now, we've seen Michigan play some big games this year, the Texas game. We've seen Michigan struggle. I've got Michigan ranked 20th. Their offense is abysmal. Let me ask you something. If I gave you $500, would you go watch Michigan play Florida State? You'd have to give me $5,000 probably to watch that dried up dust bowl. Can you imagine watching Michigan versus Florida State? There's just no offense. Michigan's quarterback situation is maybe the worst in the Big Ten. Warren had 3 interceptions this past weekend for Michigan. They struggled to get by Arkansas State 28-18. I think Southern Cal has looked better, don't you, so far this season? It's on the road in the big house, but I've seen nothing from Michigan. I don't think Michigan's got any type of, even if you're not sold yet on Southern Cal's defense and it being improved or whatever, have you seen anything from Michigan that makes you think they're going to be able to exploit that? Like, Michigan is bad. So Southern Cal, I think, probably goes on the road and beats Michigan this week. We'll talk more about that later in the week. But I've got Southern Cal at 14. The AP's got them at 11. The AP may be right on this one. I may be lagging behind a little on how good USC could be this year, but I've got them at 14. At 15, I've got Clemson. Let's go ahead and talk about the one-loss teams, and I'll explain why I've got the one-loss teams in the order that I do. Okay, so I've got Clemson at 15. I think they're probably the best one-loss team right now. They lost to Georgia. Now they got blown out. But they lost to Georgia. I've then got two undefeated teams, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. Oklahoma State's defense is atrocious. It doesn't exist. It's bad. And there's some losses coming, I think, for Oklahoma State. And I'm not saying that. Look, I picked Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 and make the playoffs. But even in those preseason prediction videos, I said that's contingent on them having a massive improvement defensively because they were really bad last year on defense. Well, I haven't seen that. Their defense is horrible. So they've probably got some losses coming. Oklahoma hosts Tennessee this week. So we'll find out. I'm either right or wrong about Oklahoma, and we'll find out this week. And they don't even need to beat Tennessee to prove me wrong. If they lose to Tennessee by a touchdown, I will probably move Oklahoma up in my rankings. Now, if they lose at home by 28, then I'll drop them down, right? But I'm still not sold on either Oklahoma or Oklahoma State as an elite team. I think Clemson would beat Oklahoma State if they played right now, and I think Clemson would beat Oklahoma if they played right now. Now, I obviously I could be wrong. There's no proving that. That is some opinion there, but that's why I've got Clemson as the highest ranked one-loss team. LSU is my next highest ranked one-loss team. I've got them at 19. And look, this is a gift here. I think this is a gift. I don't think LSU is very good. They're not great offensively. They're not great defensively. They should have lost that game to South Carolina. I have never been one to come on and say, boy, the referees stole that one. I avoid, the injury excuses for losses. I avoid the referees cost us the game excuse for. I try to avoid all that and just say, look, the better team won or the better team lost, whatever it is. There was some really bad calls in that game, and I'll just leave it at that. But LSU, lucky to escape there with a win. I don't know how good they are. I've got them at 19. I don't think they could beat Clemson if they played tomorrow. I've got Michigan at 20. That's probably a gift. Michigan is in danger of falling out of the top 25 next week because they play Southern Cal this week. So I think Clemson could beat Michigan. Iowa State's undefeated. Notre Dame struggled to beat what I think is a not very good Texas A&M team, and then, of course, lost to Northern Illinois. I think Clemson would beat Notre Dame. And then I've got Texas A&M. Texas A&M may be the best one-loss team. They look pretty good against Florida. That new quarterback that played for Connor Wegman had a big day, but it's against Florida, one of the worst Power 5 teams on the planet. But they lost to Notre Dame. I can't move Texas A&M ahead of Notre Dame. I can't. Right? Not this early in the year when they've got the same record and I just saw them play. And then I've got Syracuse at 24. They're undefeated, and Illinois at 25. They're undefeated. So that's why I've got Clemson where I do at 15. They destroyed App State, finally found their offense, 60-something points there. They were off this past week, Clemson was, and then they host NC State this week. So this will give us kind of a gauge, right? Because we saw what Tennessee did to NC State. I mean, it was brutal. We'll get another idea. We've seen Clemson play Georgia, all right? Now we get a chance to see Clemson play not another top 5 team, but a team that played a top 5-6 team, Tennessee, and got destroyed. If Clemson beats NC State as bad as Tennessee did, then maybe we got to start thinking about even moving Clemson up even further, right? Now, if they lose to NC State or it's a 3-point win or something, we might have to move them back down. So we'll find out a little bit more about Clemson. Oklahoma State, talked about them a little bit already. They play Utah this week, another huge game. Cam Rising, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? I can't give any thoughts, opinions, anything about that upcoming game until I find out one way or the other about Cam Rising. Do I think Utah's a better team than Oklahoma State? Yes, especially defensively. It's not even close. But again, without Cam Rising is worth multiple wins for Utah. We saw that last year. So they need Cam Rising for this game. I think Utah does. It's in Stillwater. It's at Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma State does have a decent offense. So Utah is going to have to be able to score some points to win this game. Now, the good news is Oklahoma State's defense is terrible. Bad news is we got to see if Cam Rising can play, but it's going to be a great game. We got Oklahoma State at 16, Oklahoma at 17. They'll have a chance to prove me wrong, right, or whatever this week. They host Tennessee in a huge game. Nebraska at 18. Look, hate it, love it. Whether you think Nebraska's great, whether you think they're terrible, here's what I'm here to tell you about Nebraska, okay? They're going to be 7-0 when they play Ohio State. So whether you've got them ranked 18th, 25th, 12th, whatever, they're going to be in the top 15 when they play Ohio State. But there's just too many other teams are going to lose. You're not going to be able to prevent Nebraska from rising in the rankings because too many other teams around them are going to be losing while Nebraska plays a series of nobodies over the next month leading up to that Ohio State game. Now, if Nebraska drops a game before Ohio State, that's bad. And they'll drop significantly in my rankings as a result because they don't play a single good team between now and Ohio State. They should be 7-0 when they play Ohio State. So you think Nebraska's too high at 18? Wait till you see them 3-4 weeks from now at 13, okay? Because they're not losing anytime soon, I don't think. LSU and Michigan, just talked about them. LSU lucky to get by South Carolina. They play UCLA this week for no reason. What in the world? Playing UCLA at the end of September for no reason at all. How did I not know? How did that game sneak up on me? They should beat UCLA. UCLA just got blown out by Indiana this weekend. In Michigan, we talked about they host Southern Cal, so another big game for the Wolverines. I've got Iowa State at 21. They beat Iowa a couple of weeks ago. They're undefeated. They were off this past week. They play Arkansas State next week, so they'll likely remain undefeated. Notre Dame absolutely destroyed Purdue. And look, I don't know what's going to happen with Notre Dame the rest of the season, but I was impressed, not necessarily that they blew Purdue out. Purdue's not very good. Notre Dame was in danger of throwing in the towel, I think, after that loss last week to Northern Illinois. Embarrassing. One of the worst home losses in Notre Dame history. Marcus Freeman was really under a lot of fire after that game. Riley Leonard was taking a beating by the media and idiots like me and everyone else. It would have been real easy for Notre Dame to kind of just tuck it in and, or mail it in or whatever. They showed up and beat the absolute life out of Purdue. I mean, they beat them 66-7. So I moved them back into my rankings at 22. It is possible that loss to Northern Illinois was some kind of weird anomaly, and Notre Dame ends up being a decent team. Now, they're not a playoff team. You can't lose to Northern Illinois, avoid a conference championship game, and expect to be placed into the playoffs by the committee. Doesn't work that way. So Notre Dame's not making the playoffs, but I moved them back up to 22. So I put Texas A&M at 23. They're 2-1. Their only losses to Notre Dame. Syracuse undefeated at 24. They didn't play this past week. And Illinois at 25, also undefeated. So there you go. That's my top 25. Now, I'm going to do something new here. I'm going to put up on the screen my top 5 group of 5 teams. Somebody from the group of 5 is making the playoffs, period. It doesn't matter whether we agree with that, disagree with that, think they're one of the best 12, don't think they're one of it, doesn't matter. Somebody from the group of 5 is guaranteed a playoff spot. Well, we'll put it over here. Here's my group of 5, top 5. Now, let me say, first of all, I am not refusing to rank any of these teams in the top 25. If I think one of these 5 teams deserves at any point to be ranked within the top 25, I will rank them within the top 25. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know I usually end up with 2 or 3 group of 5 teams ranked in my top 25. But it's a little too early for me to do that right now. My pure opinion here, I think Memphis and Boise State are the best 2 group of 5 teams that I have seen play this year. I watched Memphis play Florida State. I watched Boise State play Oregon. Memphis has a legit quarterback, legit, and they're a balanced offense. Now, like a lot of group of 5 teams, I don't think that means they could dominate Texas tomorrow. These group of 5 teams, where they really fall apart is along the lines of scrimmage and depth. Their 2s and their 3s. So I don't think any of these teams have any chance at all of winning a national title. I don't even think they've got a chance of winning a playoff game. I don't. But one of them's getting in. I've got Memphis at 1. They have a Power 5 win. I've got Boise State at 2. They have a Power 5 loss, but it's a close loss to Oregon, who I think is likely to finish as a top 10 team. I've got Northern Illinois at 3. Look, they beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame is ranked. They're the only team on here with a ranked win. You could put them at 1. You could put them at 1. If I remove all opinion, then I would have Northern Illinois at 1. But do I think Northern Illinois would beat Memphis or Boise State? No. So that's just kind of what it is. I've got Toledo at 4. They have a Power 5 win over Mississippi State. Now, Mississippi State's horrible, but nevertheless, it's a Power 5 win. And I've got Liberty at 5. And to be honest with you, this is just kind of, well, Liberty normally wins 11 or 12 games. So they don't, of course, they don't play anybody. So let's put them at 5. I'm just going to admit to you that's what that is there. So that's my top 5 group of 5 teams for this week. All right, everybody, I appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know down below what you disagree with, where you would have your team ranked or whatever the case. I appreciate you watching. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you're not, and have a good morning.